With announcements today of potential reforms around student loan funding and who will be able to access this, we have the opportunity to really promote the sector and how its opportunities can align to the personal values and be a sector for all. But how do we nationally and collaboratively work together to share this messaging, as we don't have the luxury of using salary as a defining promotional point for people to enter the sector or develop a career within?
Okay.
Jump in if that would be okay.
Yeah, everybody else is going, oh blimey. Yeah, Sarah, take it. Yeah.
Something that Gary and yourself sort of highlighted was the fact that there is no career pathway for the sector, and having that would really support, especially where there's opportunity for those reforms. They've literally been announced as of today, like you've said, and also other information coming down the line about funding for young people apprenticeships. So they're all at the House of Commons at the moment, so we'll see what the outcomes of those are. But I think Simpsper, we have a major part to play in it's ensuring that the sector's working together to share that message and to support with creating a career pathway for people that are in the sector and aren't in the sector, so they have the information to come into and transition across those roles. So that's something that we are working on and working with employers and organisations to develop. Another thing, secondly, is those professional standards, like Simon mentioned earlier. We are looking at something as well to make it easier for people to transition within the sector, because as it stands at the moment, like Simon mentioned about the sports science degree, you get somebody that does that, but they don't necessarily have the skill set to move across to do a sport for development role. However, with the professional standards, there is core content across them. We recognise that, education providers recognise it, and that's something that we're looking at to try and flesh that out and support the movement and the transition across the sector to retain people that are, you know, wanting to remain in the sector, but not necessarily having that luxury of the salary like you've mentioned. So they're two things that I know that Simpsper are working on. Don't know whether anyone else has got anything to add to it out there.
Just to unpick that a little bit, I think it's important to the people on the webinar to really define, we don't define it now because it's in webinar 1, the difference between professional standards and apprenticeship standards. Remember, those are different, and that you very ably described that in webinar 1, Sarah. But I think the other bit is that now for me it's going back to sport for development back in the 90s, where actually you were looking to get pots of funding and support from all over the place. How I think around that student loans bit, and things are moving so quickly, there's so many pots of funding. Is that where Simpsper can act as a little bit of a advice and guidance in terms of how to help people to find their way through the particular pots of funding as you've just described?
Yeah, for sure. That's what we're there to help members. You know, we want to help members any way we can. So if that's what the queries are, then yeah, that can come our way for sure.
Brilliant. Lucy, I think you've got a question, I think.
Yeah, what wasn't a question, it was just to add to that, and I can probably bring Sarah in from UK Coaching as well, a piece of work that myself and Sarah are looking at the moment, and from what Sarah's just said then about that pathway of how to come into apprenticeships, how to move through into other job roles, etc. That really does start as well with sports leaders at the I suppose the base of the pyramid of how we can transition them across and make sure that we communicate to them how important it is to use the skills that they're doing, the transferable skills, to be able to come and move on to coaching apprenticeships or into CSHO apprenticeship in the future. And I think with the change in the student loan areas, then we can really look at how do we communicate that effectively to, we have 100,000 young people going through sports leadership. How can we communicate to them and make sure that they know that their skills will be valued and appreciated and can be used to help them to actually realise their pathway into employment and beyond? And Sarah, sorry to give you maybe a hospital pass here. I don't know if you've got any comment on that as well.
Thanks very much, Lucy, and hi everybody, and thank you to Simon and his team for inviting myself and UK Coaching to join the call this afternoon. Just completely agree with colleagues in that I think we have and the key to this in my mind is that element of collaboration, about really understanding actually what the end user, that workforce, the end workforce, the beneficiary really needs in order to have a successful career, and really to work collaboratively together to ensure that we almost demystify that, and build, you know, as Sarah said, build that journey, that career pathway that is clear, and it makes sense to that end user, and that's, you know, part of our role in UK coaching is to really work with partners to ensure that we put that in place for the sector. So completely agree with colleagues.
And I think it's a really good question that's been raised, and it goes back to that point around obviously the pathways that colleagues have mentioned, but I think it's also showing the breadth. I mean, obviously I touched on it earlier and stuff, but actually people not realizing that by coming into our sector, you know, you can have a career in media, physiotherapy, whatever it is. I think there's a real opportunity for us to put a collective voice together to show it's not just the stereotypical clip pad and a whistle type thing. It's, you know, it's a real breadth of careers that are on offer within our space, and actually just by taking that step and coming and working with organizations, that, you know, you will give yourself the best chance of doing that. I think the other thing as well that I just wanted to kind of highlight as well is just even through that most basic imagery that we use in whatever messaging we're going to start to put out there. But some of the sectors that we know that this government are quite insistent on putting funding behind and support behind could be viewed as quite, you know, transactional, not particularly sexy type careers, whereas actually, yes, you know, our colleague that raised it very well in the questions there is right to say we can't pull the wool over over people's eyes and say that this is a sector that's going to generate you huge amounts of salary, but arguably you're in it for the wrong reasons if you are. What we can offer is a fantastic community give back thing that gets you out of bed every morning. No day is, you know, the same, that you can really influence and inspire the people around you. So whilst that doesn't obviously put food on the table, it does enable you to feel like you've got a career and a pathway that you can feel proud of and that you really want to, you know, invest in yourself as well. So I just think, you know, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that we offer a hell of a lot in our space. We've just got to get the framing and the messaging right, which again, colleagues at Simpsborough in particular have really definitely started to do.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to just highlight, I've got 2 or 3 members of staff that have worked for me for a number of years with me, and they're on the 3rd or 4th job, but they've still, you know, they've all been employed with sports trucks all the way, one of whom is my fellow director, Kath Percival, started 15 years ago in just doing getting people into coaching to change their lives through employment, etc. So I think there is that bit around, right, yeah, don't just discard somebody, move them through. I think the other bit I would just say is just to emphasise Gary's point, really, we have a couple of tutors in a management and leadership strand that are ex capita. They're not from sport, but they're great management leadership tutors, and what they work with some people who have been, you know, really demotivated in local authorities and whatever, not in sport and physical activity, but every time they come back and say the motivation of people in the sport and leisure sector is just enormous, and they don't have a problem with the motivation of people. So, you know, just really highlighting what Gary said, we've got a very highly motivated workforce, but actually we can make them really better with more and more training.